Okay, please turn to this section of your notes, and we're going to write down some formulas. I want you to know that on the test, you do not have to memorize these formulas. However, you have to know how to use them. And so, we've already filled out sine, cosine, and tangent, things of that nature. What we're going to do is fill out what we call reciprocal identities. And here's what that means. Cosecant of theta is equal to 1 over sine of theta. Remember when we talked about reciprocals? Secant of theta is the reciprocal of cosine, 1 over cosine. And cotangent of theta is the reciprocal of 1 over tangent. So we briefly mentioned those before. We also have what we call these quotient identities. These are really important as well. If you take sine of theta and divide it by cosine of theta, you actually end up with tangent of theta. What do you think you get if you take cosine of theta and divide it by sine of theta? What is the reciprocal of tan? Cotangent. And then finally, we have our Pythagorean identities. These are a little bit more complicated, and it's what we're going to practice today. We will actually use all these formulas. If you take sine squared of theta and add it to cosine squared of theta, you get 1. You can modify that formula so that 1 plus tangent squared of theta is equal to secant squared of theta. You can also modify the formula so that 1 plus the cotangent squared of theta is equal to cosecant squared of theta. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 formulas that we will use. Okay? All right. I'm going to pause this. All right. It says, find the exact values of the 6 trigonometric functions. So I've labeled here, girls, I've labeled here for you sine, cosine, and tangent, cosecant, secant, cotangent. And it tells us as follows. This is the given information. Sine of theta is -1/2. And it tells us that theta is in quadrant number 4. So if you tell me if theta is in quadrant number 4, which of the trig functions are positive? Cosine and its reciprocal, which is secant. So that's part of what we've identified so far. Let's see if we can write these down. You can usually get 2 right away. What is sine of theta? -1/2. Done. If I know sine, what's the other one that's easy to figure out? Cosecant is going to be -2 because it's the reciprocal, correct? Well, that was easy. Now what I'm going to do is I got to use my trig functions, my Pythagorean formulas to figure out one of these. Now, look, I have sine. Is there one of your formulas that involves sine that we just wrote down? So I'm going to choose one of those 3. Which one should I choose, the first, second, or third? First. And I'm going to go to my page, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to use sine squared of theta plus cosine squared of theta is equal to 1. And I'm going to use that. Which one will I end up solving for in this problem? I'll solve for cosine. I know sine. So what I do is I take negative 1/2 and I square it. Sine squared of theta, what this means is sine of theta, that quantity squared. That's what this means. It doesn't mean you square the theta. It means you square the sine value. So I take negative 1/2 and I square it, plus cosine squared of theta is equal to 1. This will be challenging for many of you because number sense is sometimes a struggle, meaning working with fractions can sometimes be a problem. Let's admit it. Sometimes fractions are not our friends, right? So we take negative 1/2 and square it. We square the top. What's negative 1 squared? 1. You always get a positive when you square something, correct? So we got 1 over 2 squared, 4, plus cosine squared of theta is equal to 1. Now what? Subtract 1. I'm going to rename 1 to be 4 over 4. If I subtract 1 to the other side, what do I get? Because I want to subtract and make common denominators. Yep, 1 is the same as 4 over 4. 3/4. Now I have to get rid of the squared. So what do I do to both sides? Square root. And we get cosine of theta is equal to, can you take the square root of the 3? No. Can you take square root of 4? What do you get? So we have square root of 3 over 2. Do I have a square root in the denominator? No, I don't. Now that I know cosine, how do I find secant? I take the reciprocal. So flip it. 2 over the root of 3. Can you leave the root of 3 in the denominator? So what do? Top and bottom by root of 3. And you get 2 roots of 3 over 3. Now, I have the values. Let's decide, are they positive or negative? Which quadrant does it say I'm working in? The fourth. So are the cosine and secant values positive or negative? Positive. Good. We've got 2 out of the way. Let's do 2 more. Tangent and cotangent. Okay? I can't write as small as you, so I'm going to erase that. Okay? Now, tangent of theta, I got 2 different formulas I can use. You can use one of these two. You could say 1 plus tangent squared is equal to secant squared. Or you could say tangent is equal to sine divided by cosine. Which one would you rather use? Let's do sine divided by cosine. What is the value of sine? I take negative 1/2 and I divide it by what? What is cosine? Root of 3 over 2. How do I divide fractions? Multiply by the reciprocal times 2 over the root of 3. What's going to cancel when I do that? 2's. I get negative 1 over the square root of 3. Can you have the square root of 3 in the denominator? No. So what do you have to do? Top and bottom by the root of 3. We get negative root of 3 over 3. Now I'm going to show you a trick that's going to save you time because these problems could take a long time. Negative root of 3 over 3. If I wanted cotangent, what would I have to do with this? I would have to flip it, right? I don't want to flip that. I want to flip this one. Remember we came up with this? I want to flip it when the square was in the denominator. If I flip this, what do you get? Negative root of 3. Isn't that better? Yeah. Now let's check. Which quadrant am I in? Fourth. Should tangent be positive or negative in the fourth quadrant? Negative. Have I listed as negative? Yes. There you go. I will tell you guys, I think that this is one of the hardest skills you learn all year. I think if you make it through this, you make it through the course. No problem. That's example 1. Let's try another, okay? Hey, let's enjoy the easy ones. Look at this. It says tangent is equal to 2. What should I write down? 2. What else should I write down? No. No, just 1/2. The reciprocal, not the opposite reciprocal, just the reciprocal, but thank you for answering. What formula do I have to use? Identify the formula. Which one? The first, second, or third? Second formula, 1 plus tangent squared is secant squared. So that's the formula I'm going to use now. 1 plus tangent squared of theta is equal to secant squared of theta. So 1 plus, what is tangent? 2, so we square it to get secant squared. What's 2 squared? 4. So 1 plus 4 is equal to secant of theta. What's 1 plus 4? 5 is equal to secant of theta. Whoops, secant squared. Excuse me. What do I do to both sides? So square root of 5 is equal to secant of theta. Secant of theta, square root of 5. Can I figure out cosine? What do I do? Take the reciprocal. What's the reciprocal of square root of 5? 1 over the square root of 5. Can you have square root of 5 in the denominator? Multiply top and bottom by, and you get root 5 over 5. Question is here, folks, is it positive or negative? Tell me, which quadrant am I working in? Okay, tangent is positive. So therefore, I either have to be working in the first quadrant or the third quadrant. Well, it says cosecant is less than 0. What does it mean to be less than 0? Negative. So which is the only quadrant where tangent is positive and secant is, or cosecant is negative? 3, right? So we're in the third quadrant. In the third quadrant, is cosine positive or negative? So these values should be negative. So we figured out those two. Now we got to do the other ones. Let's do, instead of 1 plus tangent squared, let's do sine squared plus cosine squared. In this formula, which one of these do I have? Which one do I know? Which one of these do I know? Cosine. Okay. So we're going to take sine squared plus, then I have to square this, right? So negative root of 5 over 5 squared. What's negative root of 5 squared? Negative times a negative is a, and if we square the square root of 5, we get 5. Square the bottom. What's 5 over 25? 1/5. Equals 1 or 5/5. What do I do to both sides? What do I do to both sides? Subtract. So sine squared theta is equal to, when you subtract, you get over 5. Now what do you do to both sides? Square root. Q take the square root of the top. I get 2. Q take square root of the bottom. So how do I get rid of that square root? And you get 2 roots of 5 over 5. How do I get cosecant? What do? I take this and I flip it. Now, I don't want to flip that because I get square root in the denominator, right? So I'll flip this one right here. If I flip that, what do I get? Square root of 5 over 2. Now, which quadrant did we say we're in? Is sign positive or negative in the third quadrant? So I have to list these as both negative. Okay. All right. Tell you what, we're going to test on Thursday when we get back. But what I want you to do right now is I want you to try problem number 1 on the back side. You work on that, and let's see if we can make some progress. When we get back on Monday, I'll do example 3, and you can practice some more problems. But this is the difference between getting a B or a C on the test, or an A or a B, or a C or a D. This skill, if you don't know how to do it, you'll get a 0 out of 6 when it comes to that problem. We got to figure this out. So we got 10 minutes, and if we get it now, you're much more likely to get it when we return from break. But if we don't get it before we leave, we could be in trouble. So at least try to get the first step. Raise your hand if you need help, and I'll come around and help.